The morning began like most in Ethan Hale's meticulously controlled world, rushed, calculated, and fueled by too much caffeine and too little sleep. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit as he stood in front of the mirror, running a hand through his sandy blonde hair. His blue eyes were weary, framed by faint shadows born of weeks spent finalizing a merger that could take Hale Systems global. On paper, he was 35 and at the peak of his career. In reality, he felt twice that. From down the hallway of his penthouse apartment came the sound of sneakers pounding against hardwood and the high-pitched laughter of an 8-year-old tornado. Daddy Lena's voice called, "I can't find my rainbow socks." Ethan let out a breath and turned from the mirror, grabbing his watch and sliding it on as he walked toward her room. "You mean the ones you insisted on wearing for good luck?" "Yes." Lena stood in the middle of her room in her new school uniform, a white blouse and navy skirt, her curly hair pinned up haphazardly. "I need them." He crouched down and began rifling through her dresser. "You'd think someone who's about to take over the second grade would have organized socks." Lena grinned. "You're funny when you're pretending not to panic." Ethan paused, raising an eyebrow. "Am I panicking?" She nodded. "A little. Your voice gets higher, like when we were late for the ballet recital and you told me everything was completely under control." He chuckled. "Fine. Maybe I'm a little anxious. Big day, kiddo. New school, new routine, new everything." Lena's expression shifted. "Do you think they'll like me?" Ethan softened. He found the socks in the back of the drawer and handed them to her. "I know they will. But the more important question is, will you like them?" She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Emily would have known what to say. Ethan's late wife had a gift for cutting through anxiety with love and ease. Since her death 3 years earlier, parenting had become a balance of trial and error and silent promises that he would never let Lena feel alone, even if he sometimes did. By 7:15 a.m., they were in the car, Ethan double-checking the GPS, while Lena clutched her new backpack like a lifeline. "Westbrook Academy," he murmured, entering the address. The prestigious private school had all the trappings of elite education: small class sizes, individualized attention, and tuition fees that could fund a modest house. But it had come highly recommended, and after everything Lena had lost, Ethan wanted to give her the best. "Can we get pancakes after school?" Lena asked as they pulled out of the parking garage. "If I survive my board meeting," he said with a wink. "You're being dropped off first, then I have an hour to prepare for the most important pitch of my life." The GPS led them through unfamiliar streets, and Ethan was too focused on mentally rehearsing his pitch to notice how unfamiliar. Traffic thickened, and the minutes on the dashboard clicked by too fast. "Are you sure this is the way?" he asked aloud, more to himself than Lena. They turned a corner, and instead of the polished gates and ivy-covered buildings of Westbrook, a modest red brick school came into view. A hand-painted sign read, "Jefferson Elementary, Learning Starts with Heart." The playground was small but vibrant, covered in chalk drawings and bright equipment. A rainbow was painted across the front door. "Daddy," Lena whispered, "this doesn't look like the pictures." Ethan's brow furrowed. "This isn't Westbrook." He pulled over anyway, double-checking the address on his phone. Sure enough, he'd entered the wrong number. Somehow, amidst the chaos of getting Lena ready and fielding calls from Tokyo investors, he'd swapped a digit and sent them across the city. It was 7:44 a.m. His meeting was at 9:00, and the real school was 20 minutes away without traffic. "I'm such an idiot," he muttered under his breath. But then Lena spoke again, pointing out the window. "Daddy, look. They have chalk outside and a butterfly mural." She looked up at him with quiet wonder. "Can I stay here? Just for today?" Ethan hesitated. Everything in him wanted to say no. This wasn't the plan. This wasn't structured or elite or safe. But when he looked at her face, he saw something he hadn't seen in months: excitement. His phone buzzed, a reminder about the board meeting, another about the investor call. One day, he told himself, what harm could one day do? "All right, princess," he said. "Let's go meet your accidental teacher." They walked toward the front entrance together. Inside, the halls buzzed with laughter and chaos and something else: warmth. Crayon art lined the walls. A scent of glue sticks and apple juice hung in the air. Then Ethan saw her. Kneeling beside a crying child, her dark skin catching the sunlight pouring through the windows, was a woman whose presence made time slow down. She comforted the child with quiet grace, her natural curls tumbling into her face as she whispered something that made the girl smile. When she looked up and saw Ethan, her eyes deep intelligent, The color of roasted coffee met his with surprise and something else. Recognition. Or was it just the kind of stillness that lives inside certain people? "Can I help you?" she asked, standing. Ethan's throat was suddenly dry. "Yes, sorry. I, uh, I think I brought my daughter to the wrong school." She blinked, then smiled. "You think? This is Jefferson Elementary, right?" "Correct. I meant to take her to Westbrook." "Well," the woman said, crouching to meet Lena's eyes, "I'd say that's Westbrook's loss." Lena beamed. Ethan's heart beat unevenly. "I'm Amara Brooks," she said, standing again. "Second grade." He extended a hand. "Ethan Hale. This is Lena. It's her first day, wherever that's supposed to be." Amara glanced at the clock. "If you need to head to work, Lena's welcome to stay with us. Just for today. I couldn't ask you to—" "You're not," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I'm offering." Lena clutched his hand. "Please, Daddy." Ethan looked between them, the woman with eyes like truth, and a daughter who needed more than what spreadsheets could offer. "Okay," he said, voice rough. "Just for today." But even as he walked away, he knew something irreversible had just begun. Ethan Hale had spent most of his adult life immune to distractions. As a CEO, distraction meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant risk, two things he had no room for in the razor-sharp world of tech mergers and venture capital. But for the past 3 days, all he could think about was a school he hadn't meant to visit and a woman he hadn't meant to meet. Her name was Amara Brooks, and ever since he'd walked into Jefferson Elementary and seen her comforting a child with the kind of tenderness that couldn't be taught, she had taken up unexpected residence in his mind. It wasn't just her eyes, though. He found himself replaying the moment they'd met like it was a scene in a film. It was the way she stood, shoulders squared, voice steady, presence grounded, as if nothing could rattle her, as if the world could fall apart around her and she'd still find a way to offer someone a soft place to land. Ethan's thoughts had wandered so far he hadn't noticed the stoplight until Lena's voice from the back seat brought him back. "Daddy, you missed the turn." He blinked and glanced at the GPS. Sure enough, he'd bypassed the route to Westbrook Academy and was now cruising several blocks past it, approaching Jefferson Elementary. "Sorry," he muttered, maneuvering the car into a nearby parking spot. "You've done that every day since I started school," Lena said, peering at him curiously. "Are you thinking about her again?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. "Who?" "Miss Amara." He cleared his throat. "What makes you say that?" "You smiled when I said her name," Lena replied matter-of-factly. "You only do that when you like something. Or someone." He shook his head with a half-smile. "You're too observant for your own good." "She's nice. She said I'm really good at storytelling, and I got to lead circle time yesterday." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't seen in months. Lena's eyes sparkled with the kind of joy that had been absent since Emily's passing. He hadn't realized how much he missed that look until now. "I think we should bring her coffee," Lena announced suddenly. Ethan blinked. "Coffee? Yes, you always say coffee makes everything better, especially on busy mornings." "She has busy mornings, right?" "That's actually a thoughtful idea." Lena beamed. "Can we do it now, please?" He hesitated for a beat, then nodded. "Let's make it quick." 10 minutes later, they walked into Brew Haven, the cozy cafe 2 blocks from the school. The barista greeted Ethan by name, a reminder of how many early mornings he'd spent here, powering up before strategy meetings and quarterly reviews. "2 lattes and a hot chocolate," Ethan said. "Extra foam on one of the lattes, and maybe a cinnamon swirl." Lena clutched the to-go tray like it was treasure. "Do you think she'll like it?" "I think she'll appreciate the gesture." They crossed the street and Ethan spotted Amara through the tall windows of a corner classroom. She was bent over a table helping a student glue sequins to a construction paper crown. She was laughing, something soft and real, and it did something to Ethan's chest that he didn't want to examine too closely. Before he could knock, Lena darted ahead and pushed the door open. "Miss Amara." Amara turned at the sound, surprised, but her face lit up when she saw them. She straightened, wiping glitter off her hands as she approached the door. "Well, this is a lovely surprise." "We brought you coffee," Lena said proudly, thrusting the tray forward. "My daddy said extra foam is the best." Amara laughed, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Did he now?" Ethan stepped inside, his heart thudding like he just walked into a second job interview he wasn't prepared for. "I hope this isn't a terrible intrusion," he said. Lena insisted. "I'm glad she did," Amara said, accepting the drink. "Vanilla latte, extra foam." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Lucky guess." "Lucky taste," she replied with a grin, sipping it. "That's perfect." Lena was already chatting with another student, her backpack forgotten in the corner. "She really seems to love it here," Ethan said. She's special, Amara replied. Curious kind, a natural leader. She wasn't like that at her old school. Amara glanced at him. Sometimes it's not the child, it's the soil they're planted in. Her words struck something deep in him. Before he could respond, a small voice tugged at his sleeve. Mr. Hale, do you want to see my picture? He looked down to see a boy holding up a drawing of a green dragon flying through a city of stars. I'd love to. They sat together for a few minutes, the classroom humming with youthful energy. Ethan found himself surprisingly at ease, engaged in a conversation about imaginary creatures and glitter glue. Eventually, Amara returned to his side with a stack of lesson plans in her hands. Let me guess you didn't expect to get stuck in a sea of construction paper before work today. He smiled, not even remotely. But you stayed anyway. He glanced at Lena, who was now reading aloud to a group of younger kids. She's happy here. That's not something I take lightly. Amara nodded, her expression softening. There was a silence between them that didn't feel awkward, just full. I should probably get to the office, he said after a moment. Big CEO things to do, terrifying amounts of them. Well, thank you for the coffee. And the company. He hesitated. Would you ever want to grab coffee outside of the classroom? Her eyebrows lifted slightly, like a real coffee, not one carried by a second grader. Exactly. She looked at him, and he couldn't tell if she was reading him or bracing herself. I don't usually date parents. He chuckled. I don't usually date anyone. Good to know, she said, the corners of her mouth twitching. So, is that a yes? It's a maybe. I'll take it. He walked to the door, glancing back one last time. Lena was still reading, her voice confident, her back straight. Amara watched her not just with affection, but with admiration. It was in that moment Ethan realized this wasn't just about attraction. Amara hadn't just created a classroom, she'd created a space where kids could become more themselves. And somehow in that chaos of crayons and kindness, Ethan felt like he was becoming something more too. Maybe, just maybe, this wrong turn wasn't wrong at all. It was the beginning of everything. The notification came in the middle of Ethan's quarterly review presentation, 2 minutes before he was set to step on stage, and outlined the most critical forecast of the fiscal year. The screen of his phone lit up with the caller ID he knew well, Melissa Home Office. He answered in a hushed voice, stepping into the hallway, already anticipating some logistical snag. Yes, Mr. Hale, Melissa said, her voice tight. Jefferson Elementary just called. Lena has a fever. The nurse says it spiked quickly. She's in the health office now. Ethan's stomach dropped. Where's Mrs. Pruitt? He asked, referring to Lena's longtime nanny. She left this morning to visit her sister in Portland. Remember, she's gone until Thursday. Of course. He had approved the time off himself. Ethan pinched the bridge of his nose, scanning his brain for alternatives. Family none local, friends practically none. Work was his world now. And at that moment, that world suddenly seemed irrelevant. I'm on my way, he said. Cancel everything. He was already moving before the call ended. By the time he pulled into Jefferson Elementary's visitor lot, he'd blown through 3 traffic lights and uttered a dozen apologies to every driver he'd cut off. Guilt gnawed at him. Not for missing the meeting, he didn't care about that anymore, but for not being there the moment Lena needed him. The nurse met him at the front desk with a calm professionalism that didn't quite reach her eyes. She's resting, she said. Temperature's at 101.8. She's alert but a little lethargic. Ethan nodded, too anxious to speak. The door creaked open, revealing Lena curled under a checkered blanket on the nurse's cot, her cheeks flushed and eyes watery. She managed a weak smile. Hi, Daddy. He knelt beside her immediately. Hey, sweetheart, I'm here. Miss Amara was with me until I fell asleep, she murmured. Something loosened in his chest. Where is she now? Before the nurse could answer, a voice came from behind him. Right here. He turned to find Amara standing in the doorway, her expression soft, her eyes warm with concern. She wore a sunflower yellow dress that made her look like she'd stepped out of a summer painting. I stayed with her while they waited for you, she said. She asked for me. Ethan rose and met her gaze. Thank you. I didn't know who else to call. You didn't have to, she replied. I was already here. A beat passed. Then she added, Do you want help getting her home? You don't look like you've done this before. He almost laughed. Not really. Emily handled all the sick days. I mostly bought juice and read bedtime stories. Amara gave a knowing smile. Then consider this a learning opportunity. Ethan's penthouse had never seen so much domestic chaos. Amara moved through the kitchen with a confidence that made the unfamiliar seem familiar. She pulled open his fridge, frowning at the rows of bottled water, expensive takeout containers, and a lone jar of Dijon mustard. Do you actually live here or just pass through for sleep? She asked, arching an eyebrow. I work a lot. So I see. She extracted a few ingredients, a carrot, a nearly forgotten head of celery, and what might have been an onion in its former life. You're really going to make soup from that. I can make miracles out of less. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her wash and chop vegetables. He found himself captivated by the rhythm of her movements, the hum she sang under her breath, the way she seemed to bring light into the room with nothing but presence. I used to watch Emily cook, he said, suddenly, the words escaping before he could stop them. But I never realized how much of a ritual it was. It wasn't just about the food, it was about care, about showing up. Amara looked at him, and now I'm learning how much I don't know. She didn't reply, just stirred the soup gently, letting silence speak where words couldn't. Later that afternoon, Lena slept peacefully in her bed, her fever subsiding. The apartment was quiet save for the ticking of a wall clock and the soft clinking of spoons as Amara and Ethan sat across from each other at the kitchen island, finishing bowls of the miracle soup. Ethan set his spoon down and exhaled. I don't know what I would have done today without you. You would have figured it out, she said with a shrug. That's what parents do. He shook his head. No. I mean, maybe. But Lena didn't just need someone. She needed you. Amara's cheeks flushed slightly and she looked down at her bowl. Can I ask you something, Ethan said after a moment. Sure. What's your story outside this place? You know mine. You know about Emily. But I don't know who you are when the classroom lights turn off. Amara's expression shifted, something cautious flickering behind her eyes. I used to be married. He waited. His name was Derek. We were together for 4 years. He didn't handle my independence very well. Wanted someone who'd fit into a mold. His mold. When I refused to shrink, he found someone else who would. Ethan frowned. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said quietly. He did me a favor, but it still took time to unlearn the damage. Took even longer to believe I was worth something again. He looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something raw and unfiltered stir inside him. I think you're extraordinary, he said, voice low. Not just because you make sick day soup and wrangle second graders with ease, but because you made my daughter smile in a way I haven't seen in years. Because you walked into our lives and reminded me what care looks like. Amara met his gaze. You don't even know me. I know enough. Silence fell between them again, but this time it pulsed with something electric, something unspoken, but heavy with meaning. Then her hand reached for the sugar bowl at the same time his did. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent a shock through him, sharp, electric, and terrifying in its intensity. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away immediately. Neither did he. When she finally did, it was with a startled shake of her head. I should go. You don't have to. I do, she said, standing, grabbing her purse. Her hands trembled slightly. Thank you for the soup, she added with a dry smile, though he'd hardly done a thing. Amara, he started, but she was already at the door. I'll see you at school, she said, her eyes carefully neutral. Then she was gone. Ethan stood in the middle of his now quiet kitchen, the smell of broth still lingering in the air, the warmth of her touch still tingling against his skin. He'd built his life around logic, caution, control, but in the space of a single afternoon with a feverish child and a yellow dress, Amara Brooks had upended every rule he'd lived by. And for the first time in years, he wasn't scared of the chaos. He was scared of what it meant to want more of it. Ethan Hale had always been a man of calculated moves. Precision defined him in business and conversation, in how he managed everything from market expansions to birthday parties. But nothing in his meticulously designed world had prepared him for the lingering pull of Amara Brooks. Ever since the fever day, the soup, the touch, the almost kiss, she hadn't left his thoughts for a moment. He replayed every word she'd said, every glance, every beat of silence between them, like a favorite song stuck on repeat. But in the days that followed, she'd kept her distance. Cordial, professional, polite. Too polite. It gnawed at him more than he cared to admit. So he did what he knew best. He acted. The first gift arrived on Tuesday morning. A simple bouquet of sunflowers and wild eucalyptus delivered to Jefferson Elementary, just as the first bell rang. Nestled in the blooms was a note handwritten in his sharp, slanted script. For the woman who turned chicken broth into comfort, thank you for everything. Amara stared at the flowers sitting on her desk as her students filed in, wide-eyed and giggling. Miss Brooks, are you getting married? Asked a boy with a missing front tooth. No, she replied, flustered. But you got flowers. They're just from a friend. A very persistent, thoughtful friend she hadn't quite decided what to do with. Wednesday brought a different surprise, a beautifully wrapped package hand-delivered by a courier. Inside was a signed first edition copy of Where the Crawdads Sing Her Favorite Novel, one she'd mentioned in passing during that feverish afternoon while chopping onions in Ethan's kitchen. A small post-it was affixed to the inside cover. You said this book made you believe in quiet strength. You remind me of it every time you speak. She sat with it on her lap during her lunch break, her fingers brushing over the soft, worn leather of the cover, and tried not to let the weight of the gesture sink too deep. Thursday's delivery was less intimate but no less thoughtful, a generous gift certificate to the art supply store she frequented for her classroom projects. The note that accompanied it was shorter this time. For the kids who color outside the lines, and the teacher who never stops them. Amara was beginning to see a pattern, and that scared her. Friday came with the most dangerous gesture of all. A small potted orchid sat on her desk when she arrived. It was in full bloom, its petals a vibrant shade of violet, her favorite color. She didn't need to read the card to know who it was from, but she did anyway. Something beautiful for someone beautiful. No signature, no flourish, just intention. And it undid her. She stared at the orchid long after the last bell rang, the classroom empty, her heart crowded with 1,000 feelings she didn't have a name for. Because the truth was, she wanted to call him. More than once that week, she'd hovered over her phone, thumb trembling above his name. But fear held her hostage, fear of the space between their worlds, of the inevitable reminder that men like Ethan didn't stay with women like her. She'd seen it too many times. She'd lived it. And just when she thought she could hold it all together, Saturday morning arrived with the one thing that shattered her carefully built defenses, a phone call from Lena. Miss Amara, the tiny voice chirped through the phone. Amara smiled despite herself. Hey, sweetheart, how are you feeling? All better. Daddy made me soup. It wasn't as good as yours, but he tried really hard. Her heart twisted. That's very sweet of him. He said I could call you if I promised to be quick. I'm glad he did. There was a pause on the other end. Then shyly, Miss Amara, do you like my daddy? Amara nearly dropped the phone. What kind of question is that, honey? The important kind, Lena replied matter-of-factly. Because he likes you a lot. Amara couldn't speak. He gets this dreamy look when someone says your name, Lena, continued her voice full of quiet wisdom. And he keeps checking his phone like he's waiting for something. Also, I like you more than anyone, except Daddy. But you're close. Amara laughed softly, a tear slipping down her cheek before she realized it had formed. You make him happy, Lena said, and you make me feel safe. I think maybe you could be part of our family if you wanted to. Amara's voice cracked. Sweetheart, that's complicated. Adults always say that when they mean it's scary. Amara blinked. What? Scary doesn't mean bad, Lena added. Daddy taught me that. Then just like that, the call ended. Lena had been true to her promise, short and sweet. But it was long enough to leave Amara sitting on her living room couch surrounded by Ethan's gifts, with her heart split wide open. By noon, Jasmine was banging on her apartment door. I swear to God, if you hide from me for one more day, I'm calling your mom her best friend, shouted from the hallway. Amara opened the door reluctantly. Jasmine stepped in, took one look at the orchid, the books, the flowers, and let out a low whistle. Girl, either you're dating a poet or a very determined billionaire. Amara slumped onto the couch. It's complicated. So I've heard, Jasmine said, settling beside her. Now tell me everything. From the beginning, with full drama. Amara did. She told her about the mistaken drop-off, the hallway moment, the soup, the kiss that almost happened, and the gifts, especially the gifts. When she finished, Jasmine stared at her like she'd grown a second head. Let me get this straight. Gorgeous, successful single dad falls for you. His daughter adores you, he makes soup and buys orchids, and you're running scared because I don't belong in his world, Amara said flatly. Eventually, someone like him remembers who they are, and they remember I'm not part of that picture. Not permanently, maybe for a while, when it's exciting, when I'm something new. That's not him talking, Jasmine said, voice sharp. That's Derek, that's trauma, and it's lying to you. Amara rubbed her hands together, nerves buzzing. You didn't hear the things Derek said when he left. The things he made me believe about myself. I'm not trying to bleed all over Ethan's world. I can't be another thing that collapses for him. Or Jasmine said gently, you could be the one thing that doesn't. That night, Amara sat alone in the glow of her apartment's reading lamp, Emily's orchid blooming softly on the table nearby. She picked up her phone. She didn't dial. But she didn't put it down either. Because deep in her chest, beneath the fear and the memory of every whispered doubt, something else had begun to bloom. Hope. The first time Amara opened the journal, it felt like she was violating a sacred space. The leather-bound book had been tucked carefully inside a manila envelope, left anonymously in the teacher's lounge on Monday morning. No card, no note. Just her name written in a neat, familiar hand across the front of Amara. She recognized the handwriting instantly, Ethan's. The journal itself was worn and soft, the leather darkened by years of handling. There was a faint imprint of time in its spine, and the faint smell of cedar and ink lingered on the pages. She hesitated, fingers tracing the edge of the cover. She shouldn't read it. She should return it. But something told her this wasn't a gift meant to be returned. With a steady breath, she opened it. The first page held a single line scrawled in Ethan's script. I don't know what to do with all the pieces of myself that don't make it into the boardroom. Below it, the date 4 months after Emily passed. Amara's heart contracted. She turned the page. More entries followed. Sparse at first, fragmented, raw. Lena asked why Mommy doesn't come home. I said she lives in the sky now. She asked if the sky has bedtime stories. I couldn't answer. I don't know how to braid her hair. She says I tug too hard. I bought a book. Still doesn't help. Everyone says grief softens over time. That's a lie. It hardens. Like a stone you carry in your chest. You just get used to its weight. Amara had to pause. Her throat was tight. She hadn't expected this, not the vulnerability, not the heartbreak pressed into every line. She kept reading each page, pulling her deeper into the quiet, wounded places Ethan never revealed in boardrooms or beneath the tailored armor of his suits. I saw Lena coloring alone today. She was talking to the drawing, told its secrets. It broke me. Sometimes I don't know if I'm doing any of this right. I work all day to give her the world. But I wonder if she'd trade it all just to have her mother back. Amara pressed her palm to the page as if her touch could absorb some of the sorrow. She closed her eyes, overwhelmed. It wasn't just grief in these pages. It was love. Brutal, unfiltered love poured out in midnight handwriting. She felt like an intruder. And yet, he had chosen to give this to her. Why? She turned to the back of the journal. One of the final entries stopped her breath. There's a woman at Lena's school. Amara. She makes the world quieter when she's near. Not smaller, just quieter, like I can hear my own heartbeat again. She doesn't know it, but she's the first thing I've felt in years that isn't loss. Tears stung Amara's eyes. There it was, the truth she never knew. Ethan wasn't offering gifts to impress her. He wasn't showing up to her classroom just to charm. He was trying to speak in a language he didn't know how to verbalize. A language written in acts of thoughtfulness and now in ink. That afternoon, as the final bell rang and her students scattered toward pickup, Amara sat behind her desk, the journal resting closed in her lap. She knew she should return it, or at least speak to Ethan. But how did one respond to being handed someone's soul? As if on cue, the intercom crackled. Miss Brooks, you have a visitor in the front office. Her pulse leapt. She found Ethan waiting near the front desk, Lena, sitting quietly beside him, her backpack swinging from her chair. When Amara stepped into view, Ethan stood awkward and unsure, so unlike the man she'd met in the hallway weeks ago. He didn't speak immediately. Neither did she. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. I didn't mean to cross a line with the journal. You didn't. His eyes searched hers. I thought maybe you'd understand. I do. He looked relieved, but also nervous. I wasn't going to give it to you, he admitted. It was something I started for me. For Lena, maybe someday. But then I realized, I've said more to that journal than I've said to anyone in years. And I thought, if I could trust anyone with the truth, it might be you. Amara glanced at Lena, who offered a toothy grin and a thumbs up from the bench. She made me wear matching socks today, Lena said proudly. That's impressive, Amara replied with a soft smile, eyes still on Ethan. Ethan took a step closer, lowering his voice. I know this is complicated. I know I come with history, but I didn't give you that journal to make you feel sorry for me. I gave it to you because I wanted you to see who I am when no one's watching. Amara hesitated. And what do you want from me, Ethan? He inhaled slowly, like the words cost him to say. A chance. Just one. To see if what's been growing between us is real. Before she could respond, Lena stood up. Daddy said we're going to the fall fair tomorrow. There's caramel apples and a hay maze. Do you want to come with us, Miss Amara? The invitation hit harder than any romantic gesture ever could. Ethan tensed, clearly unsure how to handle Lena's unexpected offer. Amara looked between the two of them, father and daughter, broken and rebuilding, hopeful and human. And then she nodded. I'd like that very much. That night, Amara sat on her couch, the journal resting beside her, unopened but no longer unfamiliar. She picked up her phone and sent a single message. "Thank you for trusting me. I'll bring the hot cider." No emoji, no overthinking, just truth. Because now she knew. This wasn't a story of a man healing a woman or a woman fixing a man. This was a story of two people finding the courage to be seen and maybe, just maybe, loved anyway. The fall fair had begun like something out of a painting, hay bales stacked in neat pyramids, string lights dancing in the trees, and the crisp scent of cinnamon and wood smoke clinging to the October air. Children darted past in face paint and flannel shirts chasing after laughter and balloons. Lena was a blur of joy and excitement, tugging Ethan from booth to booth, her energy contagious. Amara had arrived just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of violet and gold. Her scarf fluttered slightly in the breeze and her hands cradled two paper cups of steaming hot cider. Ethan spotted her before Lena did, and something in his chest tightened in a way that felt too good to be safe. "Miss Amara," Lena cried, running toward her arms outstretched. Amara knelt to embrace her cider cups, held expertly in one hand. "I've got the goods," she whispered, holding up one for Lena and one for Ethan. Ethan stepped closer. "You really came." "I said I would." He smiled, and it was one of those rare ones, the kind that didn't carry the weight of grief or strategy. Just light. Just now. They wandered through the fair as a trio. They shared caramel apples, clapped through a pie-eating contest, and even braved the corn maze together, though Lena quickly proved to be the only one with any actual sense of direction. As the night wore on and the crowd began to thin, Amara glanced toward the edge of the fairgrounds where a gentle hill sloped into an open field, blanketed in tall grass and the soft glow of lanterns. "What's that over there?" she asked. Ethan followed her gaze. "Looks like the quiet spot. Come on." They crossed the field, Lena skipping ahead with her flashlight like a tiny explorer on a mission. At the top of the hill, they found a wooden sign staked into the ground. "Starlight Picnic Point, for tired feet and warm hearts." A handful of picnic blankets had been left for visitors, most unoccupied now. Ethan grabbed one and spread it beneath a crooked willow tree. They all sat down, shoes kicked off the sounds of the fair muffled by distance. Above them, the sky opened into a tapestry of stars. Lena lay on her back, pointing to constellations she half invented. "That one's a dragon holding a cupcake," she declared. "And that's a dancing giraffe." Amara laughed. "You're a creative stargazer." "I get it from Daddy," Lena replied sleepily. Ethan didn't say anything. He was watching Amara, the soft glow of the lantern nearby, illuminating the curve of her cheek, the way her fingers rested protectively over the edge of her cider cup. There was something about this moment that made time feel slower, more honest. "Emily used to love the stars," Ethan said quietly. "She'd take Lena out on the roof of our old apartment just to lie under them. Said it made the world feel manageable." Amara glanced at him gently. "She sounds like she was a beautiful person." "She was," he replied. "And she was also flawed, stubborn, loved deeply. She had a temper when she believed in something." He paused. "She would have liked you." Amara looked down, unsure how to respond to that. "I hope, if she's watching, she knows how loved Lena still is. How hard you're trying." "She'd know," he said. "She'd also probably tell me to stop hiding behind work and stop pushing away anything that feels real." Amara turned toward him. "Is that what you're doing with me?" He looked her in the eyes. "No. I think you're the first real thing I've let in since I lost her." A beat passed. Then she asked softly, "And what if you lose me too?" Ethan's voice was almost a whisper. "That's the part that terrifies me." She didn't pull away. She didn't deflect. Instead, she reached out and rested her hand gently on his. "Maybe," she said, "we're both just a little broken in places. But maybe that's how the light gets in." They sat in silence for a moment, Lena snoring softly beside them, now curled into Amara's coat. "I wasn't planning to feel anything for anyone again," he admitted. "But you walked into that hallway with construction paper and crayons, and suddenly my life didn't look so gray anymore." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held 1,000 emotions. "That day I was running late. I spilled glue on my skirt. And I had a headache. I almost asked the principal to cover my class. But something told me not to. I'm glad you didn't." He leaned in slowly, not demanding, not rushing, but simply waiting for her to meet him halfway. And she did. The kiss was soft, tentative. A question asked and answered at the same time. There was no firework display, no dramatic swell of music, just warm certainty and a quiet exhale that said yes. This. When they pulled apart, Amara rested her forehead gently against his. "I don't want to be a rebound," she whispered. "You're not," he said. "You're a reason." A long silence followed, filled with the hum of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. Finally, Ethan looked down at the sleeping child between them. "She needs stability. If you're unsure if this feels like too much, I'll understand." Amara shook her head slowly. "She makes me want to stay. You both do. But I've spent so long guarding myself, I might need time. Then we'll move slow," he promised. "No pressure, just moments, one at a time." They stayed beneath the stars a little longer, whispering stories from their pasts, laughing at childhood memories and awkward teenage firsts, sharing secrets like they'd known each other for a lifetime. And when they finally rose to leave with Lena curled sleepily against Ethan's shoulder, Amara carried the picnic blanket folded neatly in her arms, as if it held more than just fabric and thread. It held beginnings, hope, and the promise of something they hadn't dared name yet. Love, maybe, or the kind of safety that could only be built quietly, patiently, under a sky full of stars. By Monday morning, reality, like a well-dressed stranger at a joyful party, made its entrance. The weekend had been a dream: starlit kisses, laughter over pancakes, and lazy hours reading books with Lena, while Amara lay nestled between father and daughter like she'd always belonged. They hadn't defined anything, hadn't needed to. It was enough to simply exist inside the bubble they'd built from honesty and slowly blooming trust. But the world outside had not been idle. It started with the sharp knock on Ethan's office door. Melissa, his assistant, slipped inside with the kind of tight-lipped expression that never preceded good news. "There's something you need to see," she said, placing her tablet in front of him. Ethan glanced up from his laptop. "What is it?" "A blog post. Went live 20 minutes ago. It's spreading." The headline was succinct, cruel, and weaponized for clicks. CEO Ethan Hale's surprise romance with daughter's teacher raises eyebrows and questions. The photo beneath it was grainy but unmistakable, him and Amara, mid-laugh at the fall fair Lena between them, holding their hands. They looked like a family. They looked happy. Too happy for the kind of narrative the press loved to devour. The article itself was speculative, laced with faux concern and subtle jabs. Sources close to Hale's company suggest this unexpected relationship may affect boardroom decisions. Parents of Jefferson Elementary expressed discomfort at the power imbalance. Widower or not, should a man with Hale's influence be involved with someone in his daughter's academic circle? Ethan stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. Melissa cleared her throat. "There's more." He looked up. "The board wants a meeting, emergency session, tonight." Meanwhile, across town, Amara was fielding her own share of fallout. At Jefferson Elementary, whispers followed her through the hallway, like the tail of a too-long dress. A few parents offered her tight smiles, their eyes flickering with judgment just beneath the surface. Some outright avoided her, guiding their children past with a firm grip and averted gaze. By midday, Principal Gordon summoned her into his office. He was a pragmatic man, always polite but rarely warm. Today, his face was unreadable. "I'm going to be direct," he said, motioning for her to sit. "There's been chatter." "I know," Amara replied quietly. "I've seen the article." He nodded. "You're a professional, Amara, one of our best. But optics matter in this job, and unfortunately, this relationship, regardless of its sincerity, has become a distraction." She met his gaze steadily. "Are you asking me to resign?" "No," he said, "not yet. But I am asking you to take a leave. A few weeks, until things settle." The words landed like a slap. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I don't believe you have. But not everyone sees it that way. And right now, the school needs calm." She felt like a fault line had cracked open beneath her feet. "And Lena, she'll be temporarily reassigned to another homeroom. I'm sorry." Amara left the office in a daze, the sound of children playing on the playground outside ringing strangely hollow in her ears. By evening, the boardroom at Hale and Crane was unusually tense. Ethan sat at the head of the table, surrounded by a dozen men and women in suits tailored to perfection, but hearts stitched with ambition and apprehension. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ethan, you've built this company with integrity, but recent developments have raised concerns about judgment, about priorities." "I haven't broken any laws," Ethan said flatly. "No, but your decisions now carry weight beyond legality. Public perception affects investor confidence. School-related romantic entanglements don't exactly inspire it." Ethan's knuckles tightened around the edge of the table. "She's not an entanglement. She's a person, a damn good teacher. And she's been there for Lena in ways no one else has since Emily died." One of the senior partners interjected. "We understand this is personal, but the media's already weaponized it. The board is recommending a formal statement. Deny the relationship. Clarify boundaries. Say whatever it takes to end the noise. Light of the year, you mean? If necessary, the chairman said coldly. Ethan stood slowly. I'm not sacrificing a good woman or my daughter's sense of safety just to pacify a news cycle. And what if shareholders walk, someone asked. Then let them walk, he snapped. I built this empire once. I'll do it again if I have to. The room fell into a stunned silence. He adjusted his jacket and walked out without another word. That night, Amara stood on her balcony, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, staring out at the blinking skyline that once felt infinite and promising. Now it just felt heavy. A knock came at her door. She didn't move. Another knock. Amara, Ethan called, his voice low through the wood. Please. She opened the door, her face composed but tired. He stepped in, and for a moment they just looked at each other. No words, no excuses. Just the silence that follows when dreams meet friction. They're trying to bury you, she said, and I'm the dirt they're using. You're not, he said firmly. You're the reason I still breathe some days. Don't let them twist this into something it's not. They want me to take a leave from school. He blinked. What? Effective tomorrow. Ethan swore under his breath. I had no idea. I thought I could contain the damage. You can't, she said gently. That's what you still don't understand. Loving me isn't something you can hide in a boardroom or negotiate around. It's messy. It's public. It costs things. He stepped closer. Then let it cost me, but not you. She looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. What if I'm not strong enough for this, Ethan? What if I want to be, but I'm not? He reached for her hand. Then lean on me. For once, let someone carry the weight with you. For a moment she wanted to. So deeply it ached. But the truth lingered between them. The world wasn't just watching. It was judging. And love, no matter how real, didn't always survive scrutiny. She let her hand fall away. I need space, she said. Amara, not forever. Just enough to remember who I am when I'm not in your orbit. He swallowed hard, nodded once, and left. That night, Ethan lay awake in his apartment, the echo of her voice replaying like a loop he couldn't escape. Across town, Amara sat at her kitchen table, a single orchid blooming on the windowsill, and tried not to cry. And somewhere in the quiet space between them, the first cracks of a love too real to be easy and too powerful to ignore spread into something that could either destroy them or forge them into something stronger than the world had ever seen. Amara hadn't touched her sketchpad in weeks. It lay open on the small table by the window, a blank page fluttering in the morning breeze like a question she couldn't answer. The pencils beside it remained sharp, untouched, waiting much like her heart for a sign it was safe to move again. Each morning since Ethan had walked out of her apartment, she'd tried to tell herself the silence was healing. That space was clarity. That distance was healthy. But in truth, it felt like she was unraveling slowly and visibly. At school, her classroom door stayed closed. Her students asked when she'd be back. The principal gave vague answers. The hallways whispered louder than ever. Even Jasmine, loyal and fiery, couldn't reach her anymore. You can't let them win, Jasmine had said on a phone call Amara never returned. You're not the scandal. You're the story they're scared to understand. But Amara didn't want to be a symbol or a lesson or a cautionary tale in some newsletter boardroom meeting. She just wanted peace. And every time she pictured Ethan's eyes, the ache in them, when she'd said she needed space, her stomach twisted with guilt. Because she hadn't needed space from him. She needed space from a world that didn't know how to handle them. Meanwhile, Ethan was spiraling in silence. He buried himself in work, meetings, contracts, expansion strategy, anything to distract from the ache of her absence. But his heart wasn't in it. It hadn't been for days. Lena noticed first. Daddy, she said one evening, curled beside him on the couch. Your hugs feel tired. He looked down at her, startled. What do you mean? They used to feel warm. Now they feel like heavy pillows. He laughed softly, heartbroken by the clarity of her words. Do you miss Miss Amara? She asked gently. Yes, he whispered. Then why don't you just go get her? Because sometimes grown-ups break things even when they don't want to. Lena frowned. Then fix it. That's what you always tell me when I knock over my blocks. We can build it again. You said that. He kissed her forehead, holding her tighter. You're too wise for your own good. You know that. She grinned. You're just learning slow. The breaking point came on a Wednesday afternoon. Amara was sitting in a small cafe near her apartment, staring at a cup of tea gone cold when she saw them. Two parents from the school seated across the room. They were whispering, glancing her way between sips of their lattes. She didn't need to hear the words. She'd seen that look enough lately. The one that said her, that's her. The woman who got involved with a powerful man. The teacher who crossed a line. The outsider who dared feel. Amara rose abruptly and stepped outside her chest, tightening the sounds of the city muffled beneath the static in her ears. She walked blindly down the sidewalk, the blur of traffic and strangers blurring past until she stopped at the edge of a park she hadn't visited in years. She collapsed onto a bench, fighting the burn behind her eyes. And then her phone buzzed. A message. From Ethan. Lena asked if we broke you. I didn't know what to say. Her hand trembled. Another message followed. But I miss you. Even the space between my breaths misses you. She couldn't take it anymore. She dialed him. It rang twice. Amara, his voice said on the third ring, tired, hopeful, raw. I can't do this, she whispered. He was silent. I can't walk around pretending I don't care. I tried. I told myself it was right, that I needed time. But the truth is, Ethan, the silence is worse than the noise ever was. I know, he said. God, I know. I see people look at me like I did something wrong. And I want to scream, because the only thing I did was let someone see me. I don't want you to carry this alone, he said. I never did. I don't want space anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I want something real. I just don't know how to survive it. His next words came slowly but without hesitation. Then let's survive it together. She exhaled a sound caught between relief and grief. I'm scared, she admitted. So am I, he said. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. They met that night at the park beneath the willow tree by the Starlight Hill where it had all begun. This time no lanterns, no fair, just them and the truth. Ethan stepped toward her but didn't reach for her. He let her come to him. Amara did. He looked exhausted. So did she. But there was light in their eyes again, faint flickering but unmistakably alive. I thought I was protecting you, he said softly. But I was just hiding behind you. I thought I was protecting myself, she replied. But I was only making myself smaller. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out. The journal. The same one she'd returned last week, sealed in an envelope with no note. I reread it, he said. Every word, and I added one more entry. She looked down at it, unsure. He opened to the last page. If love is the risk of being truly seen and still chosen, then I choose her. Over legacy, over perception, over fear, I choose her. Again and again. Tears pooled in her eyes. She looked up and finally stepped into his arms. The world wouldn't stop watching. The headlines wouldn't stop spinning. The whispers wouldn't disappear. But in that moment, under the quiet trees, wrapped in the arms of a man who knew her soul, they didn't matter. The real world had crashed in, but they were still standing, together. The conference room at Jefferson Elementary buzzed with quiet tension. Folding chairs lined the perimeter, filled with parents, faculty, and school board members. Principal Gordon sat at the head of the long table, flanked by the superintendent and a lawyer with a clipboard and an expression carved from stone. Amara had arrived early, dressed in quiet resolve. No lipstick, no performance, just truth in her posture and strength in her silence. It had been 2 weeks since her leave began, and yet she felt more exposed now than she ever had standing in front of a classroom full of eager eyes. Word had spread that the board was holding an internal review. Officially, it was about maintaining standards of professional integrity. Unofficially, it was about her. The whispers had started again the moment she entered the building. She's here. I heard she's suing the district. Why doesn't she just go work at a private school? She didn't answer the whispers. She didn't need to, because she wasn't here alone. Halfway through the meeting, the door creaked open, and in walked Emma. Amara blinked in surprise. The woman had been a parent in her classroom 2 years ago. Her son Miles had been a quiet, artistic child who barely spoke above a whisper and panicked in loud rooms. She had worked with him one-on-one during recess every day for a month until he'd built enough confidence to read aloud in front of the class. It had been one of Amara's proudest small victories. Emma strode in heels, clicking softly against the tile. She didn't speak to anyone, just walked straight to the front of the room and placed a folder on the table. Excuse me, she said calmly, addressing the room. I'd like to read a statement. Principal Gordon looked startled. Mrs. Chandler, this isn't a public forum. Then consider this an open letter, Emma replied, eyes calm but unflinching. And I hope the press gets hold of every word. A hush fell over the room. She opened the folder. My name is Emma Chandler. I am a parent of a Jefferson graduate and a longtime supporter of this school. I'm also a social worker who specializes in trauma recovery for children. I'm here to talk about Miss Amara Brooks. She looked directly at the superintendent. When my son Miles was diagnosed with selective mutism, we were told by 3 schools that he would never thrive in a traditional classroom, that he would need a full-time aide, a behavioral plan, and possibly transfer to a specialized institution. But Miss Brooks disagreed. She saw Miles not as a burden, but as a boy with a voice waiting to be heard. Within 3 months, my son went from writing answers on paper to standing in front of 25 students and performing a monologue from The Lion King. He's now thriving in middle school because one teacher refused to give up on him. Amara's throat tightened, her hands folded slowly over her lap. Emma continued, "Today you're asking whether a woman like that who devotes her life to nurturing young minds should be penalized for falling in love. Not with a student, not with a colleague, but with a father. A widowed man whose daughter she supported during one of the most difficult years of her young life." She paused, her voice sharpening. What exactly is the crime here? That she's too compassionate, too visible? That a man of power saw her worth and loved her for it? Emma let that hang in the air. Because if you punish her for this, you're sending a message to every young teacher watching. Be careful who sees your light. It might cost you your career. And I refuse to raise my child in a world like that. Murmurs rippled through the room. The lawyer whispered something to the superintendent. Emma gathered her papers. Thank you. And if you choose to terminate or continue this leave under the guise of protocol, I will personally ensure this school loses more than just a few quiet donors. You'll lose the very soul that keeps your reputation intact. She turned toward Amara, eyes softening. You're not invisible. Then she walked out. Just like that. That night, Amara stood on her porch, a blanket around her shoulders, journal in hand. It was the same journal Ethan had returned with a new entry. She hadn't written in it yet, not since their reconciliation in the park, but now she needed to. She flipped to a blank page. Today I learned that worth isn't something you earn quietly and protect in silence. It's something you live loudly and defend with both hands. Emma saw me. Miles believed in me. Ethan waited for me. And I am learning to believe in myself again. She closed the book, breathing deeply. The doorbell rang. She opened it to find Ethan holding 2 paper bags of takeout and a bottle of wine. He looked sheepish. I know it's late, he said, but Lena's asleep and I had this sudden craving for dumplings and conversation. She smiled and stepped aside. Come in. They sat on the floor, eating from the containers like teenagers, cross-legged and shoulder to shoulder. Emma Chandler crashed the board meeting, Amara said between bites. Ethan laughed. That woman once threatened a superintendent with a subpoena over lack of gifted programming. I believe it. She defended me. Of course she did. You're worth defending. She leaned into his side. You know what scares me most? Tell me. That even if I go back to teaching, even if the headlines fade, part of me will always wait for the other shoe to drop. Like love, real love comes with a countdown. Ethan placed his chopsticks down and turned to face her fully. There's no countdown, he said. There's only today and tomorrow, and the promise that I'll show up for both. A soft smile touched her lips. You're getting better at this. At what? Being real. He touched her hand. You're the only reason I even remembered how. The next morning, Amara received an email from the board. Her leave had officially ended. No conditions, no reprimand. They offered a private apology and promised administrative sensitivity going forward. She read the message once, then again, then cried. Not because she was going back, but because she finally realized that her worth was never up for debate, and now the world would have to catch up. Ethan had faced shareholder reports, market crashes, and product recalls with a straight spine and a perfectly timed pause. But standing behind the podium at the Hale and Crane headquarters on that blustery Thursday morning, he felt something he hadn't in years naked. The press conference had been scheduled at the insistence of the board, a gesture of transparency, a reputation stabilizer. But to Ethan, it was something else entirely, a line in the sand. The air outside buzzed with reporters adjusting tripods and fixing their microphones in anticipation. Cameras blinked like watchful eyes. A crowd had formed along the sidewalk, some holding signs, some in support, others not. Headlines from the past few weeks flashed in the minds of everyone in attendance. Romance at Jefferson, conflict or compassion. From boardroom to classroom, the Hale Brooks controversy. Is love a liability? Behind the scenes, his legal team and PR strategists had rehearsed talking points. Keep it light. Emphasize family. clarify timelines, reframe everything. But Ethan had decided hours ago he wouldn't read their script. He'd read his heart. As the flashbulbs lit up and murmurs quieted, he stepped forward, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly into the sea of questions. "My name is Ethan Hale," he began, voice even but clear. "You know me as the CEO of Hale and Crane. You've seen my name in headlines, my face on magazine covers, and my decisions dissected in quarterly reports. But today, I'm not here to talk about profits or projections." A hush fell. A few reporters lifted their pens. "I'm here to talk about truth, about a woman named Amara Brooks." Several murmurs rippled through the crowd. "Some of you may know her only as the teacher, or worse, the distraction. But I know her as someone who helped my daughter find laughter again after losing her mother. I know her as someone who gave more of herself to others than most people ever will. And yes, I know her as the woman I've come to love." Cameras clicked like rain. He continued, "In the past weeks, I've watched how easily stories can be twisted. How women, especially women of color, educators, caretakers, nurturers, are placed under a microscope the moment they step out of society's comfort zone." He let that breathe. "They say I should have stayed silent. That by speaking now, I risk alienating investors, jeopardizing growth, destabilizing perception. But if we build success on silence on the backs of those who can't defend themselves in boardrooms, then maybe we've built the wrong thing entirely." He paused, glancing to the side where Lena stood with Jasmine clapping her mittened hands together, unaware of the politics but very aware that her daddy was doing something brave. "I'm not ashamed of loving Amara. I'm proud of it. And if that pride costs me business deals, board approval, or even public favor, so be it." He leaned closer to the mic. "I'd rather be a man who protects his values than one who only protects his assets." A stunned silence followed, then a single clap, then two. Then the crowd rippled with applause, not the entire audience, but enough. Enough to mean something. An hour later, Ethan sat in his office, tie-loosened phone, buzzing nonstop. Messages flooded in. Some were angry, some supportive, others just confused. But one text stopped him cold. From Amara. "You didn't have to do that." His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment. Then he typed, "I did, not for you, not even for Lena. For me, I wanted to stop hiding the part of myself I like most. The part you gave back to me." A pause. Another message arrived from her. "Can I see you?" He didn't bother texting back. He was out the door in minutes. When Amara opened her apartment door, she wore the softest look he'd seen on her, half nervous, half grateful, all honest. "I thought you'd be buried in legal calls by now," she said quietly. "I ignored most of them. You meant what you said up there. Every word." She reached for his hand, holding it like something delicate and necessary. "I didn't know I needed to hear it until I did," she whispered. "You said things I've wanted to scream my whole life, but never thought anyone with power would say out loud." He pulled her into his arms. "I'm tired of pretending that power and vulnerability are enemies," he said. "They're not. You taught me that." She smiled against his chest. "You realize you just made yourself a target, right?" "Maybe," he said, "but I made you my truth." Later that night, while Lena slept in the next room and the city calmed after its frenzy, Amara curled on the couch beside him, her head against his shoulder. They watched the news rerun the press conference, analysts already dissecting his speech. Some questioned the wisdom. Some applauded the heart. But neither Amara nor Ethan cared. Because as the anchors speculated and the headlines refreshed, Amara opened her sketch pad and drew something simple, a chalkboard. 3 hands reaching up, 2 small, 1 large. And above them a single word scrawled in cursive. Belonging. She held it out to him. He stared at it for a long moment before saying, "I want that framed." She laughed. "It's rough." "So are we," he said. "But I think we're starting to become something whole." Outside, the city buzzed on. But in their little pocket of quiet, Ethan Hale and Amara Brooks weren't just recovering from the storm. They were building something the wind couldn't shake. The day Amara returned to Jefferson Elementary, it felt like spring had arrived early. The air was still crisp, but the sun warmed the halls like a familiar embrace. Children buzzed with the kind of excitement only a beloved teacher could stir. Parents lingered at the gates longer than usual, curious eyes peeking past security glass and drop-off signs. Staff nodded quietly, some with polite smiles, others with cautious eyes, but no one stopped her. And she didn't shrink. Amara walked through the entrance with her chin lifted and her spine straight, a soft bouquet of white daisies in one hand and her worn leather bag in the other. Every step echoed not just return, but resurrection. Her classroom had been kept in order during her absence. Desks, arranged books, shelved name tags untouched. But something had changed. Something quiet, something sacred. Atop her desk sat a folded note. No envelope, just a crisp piece of paper with her name scrawled in colored pencil, Miss Brooks. She opened it slowly. Welcome back. We missed your stories. And your hair always smells like vanilla and books. Love, Ava and the whole class. Her throat tightened. She pressed the note gently to her heart and exhaled. A minute later, the bell rang, and the door opened. They came in like petals in a breeze. 25 students, all wide eyes and soft grins, a little shy and a little loud. The moment Ava saw her, she ran forward, arms out. You came back. Amara knelt to catch her in a hug. Of course I did. I missed you all too much. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, like something sacred had been restored. One by one, the students dropped paper flowers onto her desk, roses made of red tissue paper, daisies from pipe cleaners, sunflowers drawn in crayon, each with a tiny note attached. Thank you for making learning fun. You're my favorite part of school. Please don't leave again. It was overwhelming beautiful. When the last child was seated, Amara cleared her throat and faced the class. I want to thank you, she said softly, for being brave, for being kind, and for believing in stories. She pulled out a new book, one she had written herself during the quiet weeks away. Not published, not polished, but hers. It's called The Girl Who Found Her Voice, she said. They leaned in. She was a little girl with a big heart, she began. But sometimes the world was so loud she forgot that her voice mattered. Until one day she met a group of friends who reminded her that even whispers can move mountains. 25 faces hung on every word. Outside, the school continued its rhythm bells, recess hallway noise. But in room 2C, something powerful had bloomed. That afternoon, Amara sat alone at her desk after the last bell, sipping tea and rereading the flower notes when the door creaked open. It was Ethan. He stood there holding a real bouquet, red and white roses wrapped in brown paper and twine. Thought you might want the real thing to match the art, he said. She smiled. These kids outdid you, you know. They usually do, he chuckled, stepping closer. But I had to try. He placed the bouquet down gently. How was your first day back? Emotional, beautiful, exhausting, she admitted. But I feel whole. He glanced around the room. You made this more than a classroom. It feels like a home. That's the goal, she said softly. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in velvet. Her breath caught. I know this might feel sudden, he said quickly, but hear me out. He unwrapped it slowly, not a ring, a key. To my home, not as a demand, not even a request, just a symbol. She blinked, lips parting. Of what? Of every door I want open between us, he said. For Lena, for you, for whatever future we get to build together. Amara held the key delicately, as if it were made of something more fragile than metal. I'm not moving in yet, she said, teasing. I'd be worried if you were. He replied with a grin. This isn't about rushing. It's about letting you know there's space. Always. She closed her fingers around the key and nodded. Thank you. Then from her desk drawer, she pulled something small, a pin. It was a silver rose, elegant, understated. She walked up to him and fastened it to the lapel of his blazer. For being the first person who saw me, she whispered, and didn't flinch. He didn't need to say anything. His eyes did it for him. Later, as they walked out of the school side by side, Lena came running across the lawn, her backpack bouncing and pigtails flying. Miss Amara, she squealed, hugging her tight. Did you like our roses? They were perfect, Amara replied. Thank you. Lena leaned in close and whispered. Daddy made me promise not to tell you he cried when you read our class story out loud at home. Ethan groaned. Lena. Amara laughed, a full, bright laugh that rolled across the schoolyard like music. As they reached the parking lot, Ethan paused and looked back at the school. Do you ever feel like this is the beginning of something? Amara tilted her head. No, she said. He blinked. I feel like it's the middle, the part where things start to make sense. He smiled, both confused and comforted by her clarity. And she was right. Beginnings were loud, messy, tentative. But this was the part where hearts stopped hiding, where classrooms grew gardens, and where love once planted began to bloom in the sunlight of everything real. The house on Wildflower Lane didn't look like much from the road. Modest, warm, trimmed with pale blue shutters, and framed by a small porch that always smelled faintly of vanilla and cedar. But if you looked closer, if you listened carefully, it pulsed with the kind of quiet joy most people only dream of. Inside, it was Saturday morning chaos. Lena raced down the hallway in mismatched socks, chasing after a golden retriever named Maple, who'd stolen her favorite paintbrush. Amara stood barefoot in the kitchen floor, dusting her cheek as she carefully flipped pancakes in the skillet, humming along to the Motown tune drifting from the Bluetooth speaker. On the windowsill above the sink, a single white daisy bloomed in a cracked jar. Ethan appeared in the doorway, still in sweatpants and a Columbia hoodie holding a mug that read, "World's Second Best Teacher, a birthday gift from Lena," amended in Sharpie to second after Amara claimed the top spot. "Did I just hear another ceramic casualty?" he asked. Amara didn't even turn around. "Bathroom soap dish. Your daughter and your dog are conspiring against my serenity." Lena's voice called from the living room. "It was Maple's fault." Amara arched an eyebrow. "Of course it was." Ethan chuckled, crossed the kitchen, and kissed her on the temple. "You know, 5 years ago, if someone told me I'd be this happy on a Saturday with cold coffee and a flower-covered wife, I'd have said they were clinically delusional." She shot him a mock glare. "Flower-covered wife." He grinned. "Beautiful, brilliant, outrageously overqualified pancake goddess." "Better. Barely." They both laughed. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "What's that?" she asked. He handed it to her. She wiped her fingers on a dish towel and opened it. Her brow furrowed as she scanned the contents. "Oh my God," she whispered. It was a final draft, approved, sealed, and stamped by the city's education board. The curriculum she and Ethan had spent nearly 2 years co-authoring focused on emotional literacy, trauma-informed education, and creative expression, was being rolled out as a pilot program in 6 public schools that fall. Tears welled instantly. "They said yes," she asked, voice cracking. "They said yes," Ethan confirmed softly. "We did it." Her eyes searched his. "You know this is going to change lives, right?" He nodded. "Like you changed mine." That evening, they hosted a small gathering in their backyard. Friends, neighbors, a handful of colleagues. Jasmine arrived in a red sundress holding 2 pies and dragging her new fiancé by the hand. Emma Chandler brought her now teenage son Miles, who towered over everyone, and blushed furiously when Amara complimented his hand-drawn comic book cover. Lena darted between adults directing games and handing out lemonade like the CEO of fun. At one point, she climbed up on the old garden bench and tapped a spoon to her glass. "Everyone, I have an announcement." Conversations paused, heads turned. She grinned wide, dimples flashing. "I'm going to be a big sister." Gasps and cheers erupted as Ethan and Amara laughed, confirming the news with flushed cheeks and a proud nod. Later, as stars blinked to life and the scent of grilled peaches lingered in the air, Amara slipped away to her garden. The roses were in full bloom, red, white, and soft orange, planted over the years as tributes to moments. The red for the fall fair, the white for her return to school, the orange for the first day Lena called her mom without hesitation. She knelt brushing soil off a new trellis that had just been installed. A small sign hung from it, "Room to grow." Behind her, Ethan joined quietly. Thinking, he asked. Remembering, she replied, "And promising." "Promising what?" "That I'll never forget how hard it was to feel seen, and how worth it was to fight for that." He reached for her hand. "You know what I think," he said. "Sir, I think we didn't just build a life. We built a map." She tilted her head. "For others," he clarified. "For people who need to see that love isn't always clean or convenient, but that it can survive if it's honest, if it's chosen." She leaned into him. "Then I hope they follow it. Every winding road." They stayed like that for a while, silent, breathing in the scent of earth and night and memory. Before bed, Lena insisted on one more story. Amara tucked her in, then reached for a worn hardcover with frayed corners. The cover read, "The Girl Who Found Her Voice." It had been published the year before Amara's debut, dedicated to Lena, to Ethan, and to every child who whispered instead of screamed. Tonight, Lena wanted to read it herself. She sat cross-legged in bed, flipping through the pages with careful fingers, voice clear and sure. When she reached the final line, she looked up at Amara. I like how she was scared but kept going anyway. Amara brushed a curl from her forehead. "That's what bravery is." Lena nodded. "I think I want to be a teacher too, but one who paints." "You'll be brilliant." Lena yawned and snuggled under the covers. "Because of you." Amara turned off the light, her heart full. Downstairs, Ethan was locking up, turning off lights. He looked at the hallway walls lined now with family photos, stick figure masterpieces, and a framed newspaper clipping with the headline, "From Scandal to System Changer, the story of Amara Brooks." He smiled. Because this life wasn't loud or glamorous or perfectly curated, but it was real, messy, earned, and most of all built together. In a world that had once tried to shame their love into silence, they had planted something different. Something that grew, rooted in truth, watered by resilience, and blooming always in the classroom of roses.